That is kind of cool. I like that.
uh,
It's a great way to enter the room, as they say, right?
yeah, maybe I'll do it.
Hi, here comes Ethan.
I was just telling Rob how I love my stand-up desk because I get to do that. Just like it throws people off.
Yeah. It's the grand entrance. Yes.
So welcome everybody. Hey Vinay, how's it going?
Not bad.
Cool. Well, I'll give a quick introduction where we're at, and we'll start art directing things. For those folks checking us out on Facebook, YouTube, it's Business Podcast Mastermind that started with a few talented friends in the business and podcasting space. We expanded to create a weekly event where a wider audience can join. We got here Rob Greenlee. He's the VP of Content and Partnerships at Libsyn, chair of the Podcast Academy, co-host of the New Media Show, and longtime evangelist of podcasting. Henry Lopez is not here right now. I think he's doing like a Thanksgiving break still. But he's a serial entrepreneur, small business coach, and host of Top Rated How Business podcast, dedicated to helping others start, run, and grow their small businesses. Vinay is here, host of the Predictable B2B podcast, founder of Sproutworth, who helps others achieve predictable business growth and influence through content marketing. And I'm Ethan Janney, business and executive coach and co-host of the Run With It podcast, which invites 7+ figure entrepreneurs to share business ideas and the action steps to launch them. So we should launch into what we want to chat about today. And again, as always, Deb and Mark and whoever else jumps in, you can direct us whatever direction we want to go. But as a launching point, we talked with Todd Cochran last week. I think it was an illustrative session. We wanted to focus on podcast SEO. I was actually quite intrigued by, us bringing him in as like a podcast SEO expert, and him kind of being like, oh, well, I don't even know that much, but he's built this huge business, on blogging and understanding SEO. And it was kind of interesting to see that it reminds me of the Dunning-Kruger effect. Are you guys familiar with that? The Dunning-Kruger effect?
No,
so maybe after I talk about it, you'll remember it. So basically, they found when they give people tests of all kinds of various skills, not just intelligent tests, they've actually done it like detecting humor or things like this, right? And they score people on how well they've done. And they ask them how well they think they did.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the people who did quite poorly actually think they did okay. And then as the scores improve, people start to align a little bit more with believing like that they actually know how well they did. But then after a certain level, people do so well and they actually think they did worse. They will report that they think they did worse on something. And there's various kind of philosophies behind this, but it's this kind of like you're so steeped in it that you don't understand that you have an advantage. You don't understand that other people might not get what you get. And I was kind of thinking about that in the context of what Todd was sharing. I don't think he even understands, the intuitions he has about this kind of stuff. So oftentimes you use it from the reverse angle to say, the Dunning-Kruger is a fun way to make fun of stupid people. It's kind of like, they think they know what they're talking about, but it's the Dunning-Kruger effect again,
Right.
It's sort of beginners think they're better than they actually are. So, but yeah, Todd quite well, Rob, and I think you that was your idea that he would be someone to talk about podcast SEO. How, like, when did you first start seeing that he had some expertise in that or might understand that a little bit better?
Well, he keeps talking about how important it is to have your own website. So I would say that that's probably the key thing. And he's always talked to me about how he's strategized to build traffic to his website and traffic to his podcast through his website. So websites are typically pretty well linked up with SEO. So he's optimized his sites. He's had a whole strategy. He's built, millions of video views off of his website, all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, he doesn't think he has knowledge about it, but he's got practical experience with it and he's achieved success at doing it. So, I mean, he may think that he doesn't know, but I think he actually knows a lot more than he thinks he does on it. So, I mean, I spent the early part of my career, this was back in the early 2000s, late 90s, doing search engine optimization for small companies in the early days of the internet. So it was, I can see it when it, I mean, he may not see what he's skilled at doing, but he definitely has a lot of experience at it. And that's, I mean, I think in a lot of ways it's developed to him instinctively. I don't think he's really taught it per se.
Yeah, it's also interesting too, because he's also been in the game for a while too, it sounds like, right? So he's seen the evolution of how this kind of thing changes. Where did it start from? I mean, we can remember, it seems like a distant memory now, but when Google first launched, right? And it was like, as all of a sudden SEO became a thing. And then they were trying to help people understand how to fit their algorithms better and this type of stuff, but it's still really got a lot of flaws to it. But
yeah, I mean, it's not a perfect thing either. I mean, but it's also something that used to be able to be gamed a lot more than it can now. You could play with metadata. I mean, that was one of the things that was going on when I was doing it, was that people were there were holes in the algorithms with the search engines, whether it be Yahoo or AltaVista or some of the earlier search engines, where you could play around with metadata to compete more. And there was PageRank, which you could get little tools in your browser that you could analyze the page rank of a particular page, and PageRank directly was allegory to how high you showed up on the search results in the organic search. So, and then over time, there was kind of like the split between organic search and paid search, right? So you had this conflict going on. Google was evolving their business model, and they were starting to sell keywords, right? So you could link up a keyword with a website, and it would show at the top of the page. For a while, the government was pushing on them that they had to identify that area of the website for the paid search. But the organic stuff always had to be kept, clean and pristine and based on a fair algorithm of PageRank. And I think that still exists today. They're now hiding that PageRank information more than they used to, because people would see what people's various websites were at different page ranks, and they would see what the strategy was on that page, and then they would duplicate those to hopefully try and create that higher page rank. So they basically took that tool away, so people can't see what works and what doesn't work. So, I mean, because I had websites that I had like page rank of like 8 or 9 or something like that. And really kind of 9 and above was typically for like Microsoft.com and Yahoo and the really, really big websites that had a lot of traffic to them. If you were in the 6, 7 range, you did well. You showed up usually in the upper part of page 1 or something like that of your search results. So that's always the goal, right? Is when you type in a keyword, you want to show up in the top portion of page 1, right? It's like being above the fold. It's kind of like a newspaper, right? If you're in the upper quadrant of the newspaper, you're going to get seen more than if you're in the lower part of the page, right? Or the fold happens, right? Newspapers are folded in half. You don't want to be down on the lower part. You want to be up on the upper part. So that was always the goal of the organic search. And when Google started selling keyword listings in there, those those paid placements would always show at the top of the page, so they were always more valuable. But what we started to see, and we see it now today, when you go to Google, you see duplicate entries, right? You see the top of the page could be company, just throw it CNN.com or something like that at the top of the page. And then right below, a few spaces down, will be CNN again. And it won't be, a sponsored link. It'll be an organic link, right? So
Right.
it was always the goal to get into that organic area because that was free, right? You didn't have to pay for that placement. So,
Right.
but it also creates the situation too, where if you have a paid search area at the top, people can click on that, right? You have to pay when people click on the upper one. But if a visitor clicks on the lower one, just a couple spaces down, you don't have to pay for that traffic. So that's
Right.
where Google is today. And that's, I think from an ROI perspective, being 3 spaces down in the organic area is where you want to be.
Right. I know specifically for myself, once I found out there was the ad area, and of course it would say that they were the ads, and then the organic area, I just like, oh yeah, why would I click on an ad, right? These are people that are just trying to get my attention that don't necessarily deserve it,
Right.
They paid for it. Sometimes I even used to click the ads, of a business that I didn't like. Oh yeah,
just to drive up
screw Walmart,
their
they're
costs,
pay for
right?
that click,
Right. Right. Yeah.
But yeah. Now I actually, now actually, as someone who's been in business, having my own business for a while and running ads and things like that, if there's a business that I'm patronizing, I specifically don't click on their ad.
Right.
I go down and click on their organic because I don't want to drive their costs up, because
right,
to
exactly.
pass it on to me. So
you can kind of see where that whole dynamic kind of psychology works too. And Google had to adjust their algorithm too, that if somebody clicked on that paid link too many times, right? If, let's say it was a competitor and they want to drive up the cost to a competitor of theirs, they could just click on that link, right? The paid link, right? And drive their costs up. Well, Google is identifying that traffic, and they'll limit it based on an IP address, but that's been going on for a long time, right? So you can't really game the system.
Yeah. I want to switch back into the topic here, going how we can apply this to our podcast. And I know, Deb, you have something you want to interject specifically. We'll get there in a minute. One thing that I'm just going to throw the idea out there, actually. I'm just going to throw it out. And then I just want to go straight to Deb, but I just want to put it in our minds to think about it. The idea is, we talk about authenticity here, about how that might be a good, Rob, you've mentioned it several times. Like, authenticity really makes for good podcasting results, or that's kind of the key thing with podcasting. You're in someone's ear, you're authentic, you're this personal voice. And then we talked about gaming the system. And I think what I remember, this happened to me maybe like 10 years ago now, but it's significant memory that still affects me today. I had a project that I wrote a blog about. I kept it on for a few months. And I remember thinking, it was a musical project. I just remember thinking, oh yeah, the internet, you just put something up and people are going to find it.
Right.
And, they didn't find it, and I think, like, I looked at people who were doing similar projects and people were finding it. And I looked at what is the difference, and they were putting effort into, let me put it this way. There's something about putting yourself out there more. So it was easy for me to put something up without showing it to people, like, actively. That I feel like was a little bit like you almost got like I'm a little bit afraid that people would see it, right? So I didn't put myself on the line as much by promoting it in some way, or trying to share it widely, or doing some extra effort to promote it.
Right.
So basically, the general question I want us maybe to consider later after we talk with Deb is, like, how do we balance the authenticity aspect with the gaming the system aspect? And is it just a matter of time? Maybe it's just be authentic, don't worry about gaming the system, and just keep involved with it long term. Or, there's some other ingredient. But that's just to think about. Let it simmer a little bit. Deb, what did you want to bring up?
So thank you for bringing on somebody that's so amazingly smart around this, because if nothing else, it gives us something to think about. as we move along. But I guess my question is, being early on, 9 months into podcasting, I have done a few things, and I'm wondering if that's 60-70% of the way there, and all this extra effort that our last week's guest, if you have time, certainly worth it. So, I mean, whenever I put out a podcast, it has show notes. The show notes have keywords. There are hashtags that go along with the social media. And then I promote it to my email list. I ask my guests to promote it. And I find that word of mouth has been increasing the viewership and the number of downloads. I feel like the organic way is, or the authentic way is best for me right now, not looking to specifically monetize the podcast, but through the relationships, generating business in other ways. So I guess that's what I do right now. Is that good enough for now if I stay true to that? Or no, you really need to start doing some of these other things. Otherwise, you're just going to get lost. You'll never make the top 100. Any thoughts around that?
Do you want me to take that?
Yeah, go for it.
I think certain shows are going to do better with these marketing strategies, especially if you're doing some paid advertising. So this is what I typically recommend to shows is, it probably doesn't hurt to give it a try and come up with a strategy and think about how you might utilize these paid marketing tools in whether it be Facebook or Twitter or or LinkedIn or other platforms that are making available promotions, or Google or whatever. It probably doesn't hurt to do some testing around it to see if it works. One thing that I have seen and heard is that, like anything, you play around with something and you come up with a strategy, and you whether randomly or accidentally, you discover something that works. And sometimes that doesn't just happen, after one test. So I think, your organic strategy is like the baseline, right, of what you really have to do to build your show, build connections with people that will mention it to friends or relatives. That's the core of it. But then having kind of like this other experimental process that you're doing to test various platforms to see what works and what doesn't work. And if you start seeing that, nothing is really working, and hopefully you haven't spent a lot of money, then you can make a more intelligent choice about whether or not that would be something that's going to work. So, and maybe, if you find that it isn't working, then hopefully you haven't spent too much and you can just back out of it and really drill in on the organic side. But keywords and keyword relevancy. And I think that was the other thing that we talked about with Todd was, as you think about topics or themes or the words that you use to describe in your metadata, like your titles, your descriptions, all that stuff, are probably more important than even tags. Tags, I don't know that a lot of the podcasting platforms really give a lot of credence to tags. I think it's really description and titles are most important. So that's my thought on it.
Just on that, I was so one of the things that Todd really inspired me about was his website, and so what I've done last time we were with Todd was refresh my website, and what I've ended up doing is creating a section of the landing page, which is now showing last week's or this week's podcasts on there. And so I'll hopefully get some keyword searches, and that will be linked to the content that's on there. The other thing which he made me think about, and the question I had for him last week, was evergreen versus like current topics that are coming up. And it was great. It was a great answer, because he kind of said, evergreen content with great keywords and great searches can be just as powerful as just the hot topic that everyone's talking about in technology or business or whatever. So I release 3 podcasts a week, and now something that I'm thinking of doing is do one interview release, I do a Mindset Monday, which is I've got a bank full of things that I'll talk about getting people's mindset right for business. And then I played with the Thursday episode to be something a little bit more current and a little bit more topical. So
Mhm.
for us in the UK, I'm in the UK, it was all about the chancellors, the finance guy in the UK talking about how he was going to sort of repair the economy. So I put my own view on that, and this is what I think I'm going to do. It's really made me think that actually, so evergreen content is fantastic, and it sort of gives you that lasting impact. But actually, I'm going to trial talking about something that's a current topic and see what sort of traction I get from that as well.
Yeah. Current topics combined with connections to evergreen topics is a really interesting way of doing that. Trying to combine those together is almost like trends, right? So you see something that's current event, but translated into something that's part of a bigger trend. So, it could conceivably make that content a little bit more evergreen. But yeah, I think that's a good strategy. And if you can create a separate landing page on your website for that evergreen content, and then fully populate that with metadata in the H1 tag and the title, so you have good keywords up there.
So the way I approached it, Rob, was to have like the last, because I released 3 a week, to have the last 3 episodes up on the website. But it was Todd suggesting that you almost have a landing page for every episode.
Yeah,
that seems to be the consensus.
Yeah, it's not it's actually a really good idea. I mean, if you look at typical website traffic activities, your homepage doesn't get the vast majority of the traffic. Most of successful websites get what's called deep traffic. So people go directly to pages that are inside of your website, not at the surface, because not that many people go to, just your .com home landing page. So, I know a lot of podcasts hosts, Todd's one of them, is say, on your homepage, you want to make sure you have a link to some current content, right? So if a person does land on that homepage, they get quick access to whatever you want them to do, whether it's read an article, whether it's listen to a podcast, but you want to have what you do right up front and give people pathways to get to the deeper content. But really your internal pages are what Google really likes to chew on and drive traffic to. Yeah.
I have a couple relevant, interesting experiences from my pursuits recently. So one with a project that I have right now, and unfortunately, Deb was getting some emails on this. I'm sorry, Deb, but we're doing a convention, and I have sponsors, and one of the sponsors, it's a very niche industry. So I actually haven't worried too much about SEO. But just to give an example of that, sort of what you're seeing, deep traffic, I have a sponsor. I put his logo on the convention page, and, he emailed me, said, hey, I just went to your homepage and you didn't have a link, to the convention. You should do that. And I emailed him back and I said, oh yeah, for sure. But I realized that wasn't one of my priorities. I put it up there. That's fine. But I wanted to just double check on the traffic, and the traffic to the convention page was over 5 times the amount of traffic to my homepage without a link from the homepage, and I was directing people. They're not through SEO. I don't think that's where I'm getting most of my traffic, but from an email list. But I think it really helps to, I think it just really helps to understand that you're going to direct people to various pages, and a homepage. I think the problem with a homepage from a marketing perspective is you have to appeal to a very broad audience with a homepage. And that's probably why most businesses don't send people to their homepage, because what they want to do is they want to say, okay, you want to sign up for MailChimp because you're a small business owner. Okay, great. Let's send you to the MailChimp small business owners page so we can make sure we present it to you as a small business owner and it looks good. Or you're a musician. Let's send you to the MailChimp musician page, so you can see how it looked from that angle. So I think that's an interesting example from where I'm at, that you find that there's various pages that are more important to people than the homepage. And then The other thing was on the podcast growth thing. I made a post on Indie Hackers last week, just reflecting on our own podcast growth. We're not huge, and we haven't been in it much longer than you, Deb, but just taking a minute to reflect on what's worked and what hasn't. And the conclusion I came up with was keeping at it is important, right? And having a consistent thing that you do. However, doing, and it's kind of piggybacks on what Rob was saying, trying new things all the time to get somewhere. Like, let's try this angle, let's try this angle, let's try this angle, let's try this angle. Because what I found was in any periods we were stagnating, we weren't trying anything different. You were kind of just keeping going with the model that we had. And then the thing, when we started to try things different, some of them worked, some that didn't, but some of the things that we tried then started to influence the growth. So what I noticed in our growth curve was gradual uptrend in growth, but not just because we're continuing to do what we always do, because it just so happens that at little points along the line, something clicked here and that raised it a little bit and that kept it going up. Something clicked here. If we didn't do anything, probably decline or stay flat.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the pattern that I've seen for years with the variety of shows that I've been involved in too, is that it's never a smooth uptick in activity with your podcast. It goes in spits and starts, right? And most people will see that just based on just the topic changes that you have in your podcast. Some people have more interest in that topic than another topic, and that can drive a lot of variability too. But just like Ethan was saying, I mean, trying different marketing approaches, different outreach, different kind of strategies to get attention to your podcast, you'll discover something that just clicks, and you'll see sometimes it'll happen, just you won't even know why it happens, and then you wind up going and doing research to find out, well, why did my numbers double this week, right? I have no idea. So you dive into the number or the stats area and you start researching. You start saying, well, what platform did that happen in? Where was the biggest jump? Was it Android? Was it iOS? Was it on the desktop? Was it in a browser? Was it, and you start digging into what caused that little bump. And then maybe you can piece it back to an article that was written that included your podcast in it. I mean, that happened to me a couple times. I got my early podcast got listed in PC Magazine. I didn't even know that it was going to happen until it just happened, and there was like millions of magazines that went out, and all of a sudden my numbers doubled, and I didn't do anything, right? So you just have to be aware of spikes like that, and then do deep research, and then you can really kind of find what caused that. So that's my comment on that.
And sometimes things happen that you think are going to give you a big jump and they don't.
Right.
I like to tell people this, and I'll share this here, but like, it's kind of a funny thing to me. So somebody voluntary from the Wall Street Journal came and contacted my business. They said, I think you got a cool business. I want to write an article about it. I said, okay, sure. And they wrote an article in the Wall Street Journal about my business. And I'm thinking, man, calls are just gonna start streaming in, and I think we got like 5 calls, that were directly related to that article in the Wall Street Journal. And so it's like, that's the Wall Street Journal. I mean, for me, at least, that just sounds like now for me, it's just more powerful, at least, to just tell people that we were written about in the Wall Street Journal than to actually, it's more, for me, it feels more like a resume thing than to actually that we got clients through that exposure. And that was just fascinating to me. It was just fascinating. So sometimes either you work really hard to do something exposure wise, or it happens organically. Like you said, Rob, maybe just somebody writes an article, right? But you don't always know what's going to work and what's not. And then you just double down. So what did that tell me? I may not spend a lot of my effort trying to get written up in, publications if my purpose is to get calls to my business, right? If it's to build my resume or my reputation, okay, maybe that's different. But to like actually get customer flow to that particular business, it's kind of it's not
Well,
worth it.
oftentimes what happens in the big media like that is that they don't even put in there a link to your website or a link to anything. They just put your name in the article. There's no link reference that oftentimes, I mean, it happens, but I've been listed in lots of articles that don't have any kind of reference to what my website address is in the article, because a lot of those publications will view that as like a promotion for that, not content. So they'll
Right.
strip those links out. So yeah.
Right. True.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think just to wrap up that point, I think it's these fits and starts. That's exactly how I put it. I think you said something similar to that, Rob. It's like
Yeah.
slow growth happens, but it happens in fits and starts. And that's also like, I remember evolution is kind of like that too. You know, people think of this sort of evolution in terms of biology happening. There's been a lot to say that, you know, it is something that gradually happens over time, but there's these moments, right? A DNA edit here, a deletion here, a little mutation here, and then all of a sudden, you know, you have a photosensitive cell, and then that leads to vision, right? But it has to happen once, right? There's a 0 to 1 moment, and in a slow growth, there's like several 0 to 1 moments. You got to pay attention to when they happen and what they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
Cool. So in going back to the question that I raised, unless somebody else wants to raise something else, gaming the system, and how authentic is that to game the system? And do we have any thoughts about, has the game changed to, like you said, like Rob, maybe the system, are the algorithms getting better so that people don't have to think so hard to, you know, put in the right keywords and stuff like that? Or is that just a fantasy? You can't just ignore, you know, SEO or these little tricks and these hacks and
Yeah.
things like that.
I mean, I think gaming the system is really kind of off the table nowadays. I think it is about being authentic with what you're doing, and I think that's the key. That was the game in the early days of the search engines, was gaming the system. But Google learned from that, and they took the ability to game the system kind of out of the equation, right? And even looking at like hosts like Apple podcasts. They've been taking down podcasts that are trying to game the system by keyword stuffing titles, keyword stuffing descriptions. They'll just take you down. You know, I mean, it's really gotten rather aggressive on their part. They want clean metadata is what they want in the shows that are on their system. They don't want people that are kind of scamming traffic and those kind of things.
So let me present a scenario that kind of bridges these two ideas, like, because I feel like it almost seems like it's a spectrum. Like gaming 100% is just like just creating a page that's just keywords and that's it, right? You know, versus 100% authenticity, you know, just waking up in the morning and writing for an hour or whatever comes out of your mouth without editing it or something, right?
Right.
So here's a scenario. So if I'm blogging, right, I can just say, I want to start a blog. It's going to be about what I have to share with the world. Right. And then I start, it's really authentically me. And it's just kind of like, what was I thinking about today? Yeah, you could really use a different kind of can opener on my soup today. You know, whatever. It could just get really obscure. And by studying SEO, by studying, if I want some attention, if I want to actually help people and create a project that serves, then I start to learn, oh, well, listen, I could talk about soup today and I could talk about nuts tomorrow. Right. And I'm gonna alienate the nuts people, and I'm gonna alienate the soup people, and then nobody's gonna come to the site. So I'm learning by studying SEO and studying what works. I'm going, okay, I need to make a page that's just about soup. We're just going to stick with soup. We're going to go all in on soup, and I'm going to look for keywords that people find, and it's going to help me make sure I write the right content. So that to me feels sort of like gaming the system, because I'm trying hard to figure out how the system works in order to create my content. But at the
Well, I
same
think
time,
that-
there's a good intention behind it, I
Right.
suppose. Yeah.
The takeaway from that is that you're playing the game the way the game needs to be played to be successful on these platforms. That doesn't mean that you're scamming it. That means that you're being smart about what you're doing. You're making those logical connections between keywords, topics, and your show. And so when Google looks at it and they look at the links that you're offering on your website to outside resources, that there's a consistent pattern there. If there's, if where things go sideways is when you start making exaggerated claims about what you're doing, or you're making false claims about what you're doing. That doesn't mean that you can't create content based on keywords that are significant, but also map to your show too. So there has to be consistent. These algorithms are smart to detect when there's kind of fraudulent activity going on. And that's the takeaway. I think on what you said, Ethan, is exactly right. I think it's being smart about what you're doing, what your show's about, what the keywords you're using. They all need to map together, right?
So I came up with like a few different criteria here. I think it might be useful just to reflect on.
Right.
One, understanding the game that you want to play, right? So like, what am I trying to achieve here? Where is this going?
Mm-hmm.
Do I want a lot of attention? Do I want money? Do I want to inform a certain audience? Whatever it is.
Right.
But then also understand what game you are playing. And I think maybe that's the thing that could be easily ignored. Hey, I'm trying to reach these people by having a podcast, and then being like, okay, now I'm in the podcasting game. And then, so then understanding whatever game that you're in, what are the rules that you need to know to play that game? So it's not about gaming the system in terms of games. It's about just
playing the game.
Hey, if I'm playing the game, what are the criteria? What are the rules? How do I?
It's like playing. If you're a basketball player, you have to play by the rules. Else the official blows the whistle on you and gives you a foul. Right? It's the same kind of scenario, really. I think. Yeah.
Right. But then you could also be Dennis Rodman and break the rules, but then you're playing the game of like being an entertainer, and so it's like a pseudo game. Sorry,
and you could get kicked out of the game, like Dennis Rodman got kicked out of lots of games, right? So, right.
Yeah. That's smart. Maybe a little joke there.
I think,
but I like that way of thinking about it. Yeah. What were you going to say, Vinay?
I think an explanation I found particularly helpful is that while we do not know the exact algorithms that Google and the other search engines use and continue to tweak, a good parallel is the fact that Google is increasingly trying to mirror or replicate the way we form relationships in the real world.
Right.
And a good way of thinking about that is if you ask your friends or colleagues, what is Ethan good at or known for? They usually have a couple of words or maybe 3 or 4 that would describe you. And if you focus on those words, then that's what you become known for and gain visibility on the search engines for. So if you think of it in such terms, it brings it a little more focus to your efforts as opposed to trying to game the system, which inevitably will be a losing effort because you have to be working for Google in order to know the exact ways to continually tweak your content and other aspects of your website.
Vinay, you're exactly right. Google, if you really research what their goals have been over the last 10 years, is to create kind of trust relationships. I mean, what is your reputation, right? These reputational relationships are what has been key to that PageRank I was talking about earlier. Is what is your reputation, and do trusted sources trust you? And that's the other aspect of this that is hard to game, right? So, let's say you are an expert in the area that I'm trying to pursue with my podcast. Let's say I'm doing a podcast on SEO, and Vinay, you're considered an expert in SEO in Google, right?
Yeah.
You linking to my podcast is like a validation of the reputation
Authority.
that I have, right? So that's how Google looks at this stuff, and that's how they've been looking at it for a long time.
So I had someone on my podcast guest last week who worked for LinkedIn for about 5 or 6 years and now has created a business how to help people use LinkedIn in business.
Right.
And I know it's slightly different to Google, but essentially we were talking about like what is the key thing for LinkedIn that will raise your profile. And that this again is slightly like Google because it's very organic, although you can have paid ads, but at the moment people are seeing great leverage on LinkedIn as organically as well as paid. And one of the things he said this sounds so silly, but if you make LinkedIn money by either connecting to places that make ads or you bring in new people who are eyeballs on their ads and things like that, you're going to be successful on LinkedIn. And I think it's a little bit like Google. If you bring people to your website and you might if you use ads yourself and you're bringing traffic, and it sounds a very simple game, but actually, if you're bringing eyeballs to LinkedIn or you're bringing eyeballs to Google, and that's helping their ad revenue and their different strategies of making money organically, that's actually going to be where your success is. So everyone says, oh, we've got to work out the algorithm and we've got to, but actually, if you just take it back to the very base level, if you bring eyeballs, bring attention to Google or LinkedIn, you're going to be successful.
The only problem I would have with that is that, at least in my case, I need to decide whether I want to help LinkedIn or Google or any other platform or my own business. And I personally would choose my own business, and therefore I would invest more in developing relationships and the network that could be supported by LinkedIn or Google.
It was a really interesting one because he said to me, so what do you want? Do you want thousands of views on one of your posts, or do you want 200 views and 2 clients? And from me on a business owner on LinkedIn, I was like, well, I want the 2 clients. Like the fun of vanity metrics, a couple of hundreds of thousands of views on is LinkedIn is fantastic, but I would prefer the 2 clients and organically grow my business and make it more successful.
It's looking for results versus just eyeballs, right?
Yeah.
I agree.
And sometimes the eyeballs are the results. I think you just have to decide what game you want to play.
What your goals are.
As someone who's been in music, I think that can be a difficult one for musicians. They want to, they're playing music, and a lot of times they're sort of conflicted. It's not always like popular to want to make money from music, or maybe they have awkwardness around it. So like, what's my goal as a musician? Do I want just people to know about me and hear my music, or do I want to make a living?
Right.
But you make those decisions, right? I like the idea that you just make a conscious choice. Like you said, if you want 1,000 websites views and that's going to make you happy, great. But if you think you're trying to get clients, think about it differently, because maybe you only want 200.
Yeah, you start thinking about who those traffic people are.
Who is it? Yeah.
Who is it? Not the overall number is only just a numbers game to get. It's like a sales situation, right? I mean, how many cold calls do you make to get a certain amount of sales, right? Mm-hmm. It's the conversion is what matters to people that are trying to build a business. Yeah.
A couple of interesting pieces that came up recently. One, Aileen Lerner was a guest on our podcast, and she maybe I brought this up last time, I'm not sure. She writes content, and one of the cool things I think about her content, she's aiming her content at developers, and she's avoided some of these typical popular content strategies because she can sense that her audience doesn't buy it or they don't like it, so she's not going to make a listicle, she's going to avoid that, and she's going to write a post where she does some research, has some numbers behind it, maybe some graphs, some things like that. They're going to appreciate a little bit more dense content. So that's just interesting in terms of knowing who your audience is.
Yeah, but software developers are a bit like musicians, like in the sense that they feel that they want to just create and they don't want to go into management or own their own business. They just, I worked with software developers for like 7-8 years, and you get the type of software developer who's just, I just want to write code. I don't want to worry about management or anything.
Yes.
I just want to sit and write code. So,
Yes.
so that person you were saying, like aiming for that market and understanding that market is incredibly important.
Yeah, definitely. I know that's what I've focused on, like with my projects recently is, I found it very interesting, like having a website. I stopped thinking about SEO for a while, right? But it's because I knew that people weren't really searching for what I had. For example, this project I'm doing now, it's like learn advanced piano skills online. Okay, people are saying learn how to tune a piano. That's what they're searching for. And there's businesses around that. And so if I wanted to build that business, like just kind of start from scratch, and it's a very basic thing, then maybe organic search would work. But I realized building an email list and having email marketing and knowing that it's going to the right list of people that need the advanced skills, that already have the basic skills, that aren't really searching online yet for it, was a better strategy. And yes, the numbers, it could be only 1,000 people to visit a website, but you might get, 20% of those people converting, and, average, customer value might be a few $100s, right? For one of those people that visits the website. So it's really important, I think. Oh, the other thing I was going to say is we had a podcast episode with, I can't think of her name. It was a woman talking about the marketing online products. And she said there were these 3 levers that she thought about really seriously. And one was traffic, the other was conversions, and the other one was average order value. Mm-hmm. And basically what she would do is think of them separately. Which lever do I want to pull right now? So if I'm getting a lot of traffic, but I'm not getting a lot of conversions, that's silly. To get all that traffic, I can increase my conversion rate, and then maybe I'll make more money. Or maybe I'm getting a good conversion rate, but I'm not actually, selling as many products. So let me see what I can do to increase what people buy from me, right? Mm-hmm. So I think you can think about it in terms of the example you gave, Mark. It's like, yeah, I don't need 100,000 visitors. I don't need 100,000 listeners to my podcast. Maybe I just need 10,000, but I need to home them in so that they're doing something. I need them to be the right kind of listener, this kind of thing. It's very useful.
Yeah.
Vinay, have you had any, in terms of experience with like SEO and strategizing around this, is there any common themes that you've come across?
Well,
outside of podcast?
Content and SEO are pretty much related. So I'd be foolish to ignore SEO if I'm going to invest in content marketing.
Right.
In that, while you certainly want to be focused on the audience, it also helps to put in at least a bit of basic effort in optimizing the post so that you can increase your chances of visibility. So I completely agree with the ideas that you were talking about, and having talked to other people in the podcast and SEO space, they would concur as well. So show notes, trying to build a bit of a blog post if you can, but more importantly, just having people organically share and link back to you and things certainly do help. There's a new service, I don't know if I haven't played with it as yet. It's called elasticpod.com. It provides a bit of search to your existing podcast, just if you submit your RSS feed. So you can have a bit of a play and see if that helps with the overall ability to increase the visibility of your content, especially with past episodes.
Mm-hmm. Cool. One other thing I just remembered I want to call back to I thought it was really powerful. There was more to it for me than kind of the surface level. What you said, Rob, you were saying when it comes to Google, it's about creating trust relationships, about what is your reputation, and then are you trusted? And then also reputational relationship. And one thing you said is, do trusted sources trust you? And I thought that's really, really powerful. I remember, again, starting a project in a space where nobody knew who I was. And when people don't know who you are, it doesn't matter if you deliver something incredible. They're going to be like, who's this? You know, there's just there's a guy who did, I think he dedicated his life research to repetition and exposure. Zayantz, I think, is the name of the scientist, and just found that we like things more that we've been exposed to previously, even subliminally,
right?
Like something that you didn't know that you saw. And actually the effect is stronger that you like something more, the less that you consciously knew that you saw it. So there's a lot to be said for getting the exposure to people and getting it from the right direction. And so just lead that to finish the thought. Once I started putting myself in front of the influencers in that industry, and then they, would say, they started participating in my projects and they say, hey, this Ethan guy, he's got something good. Then all of a sudden, then the trust starts to flip, right? And maybe it's because they've had exposure to the other person and you're sort of like contagious or something. So I think that in terms of the, not gaming the system, but how the game is played. And this one, I remember what Todd said last week. He said, get those sites to link to your article, get those sites to link to your podcast that want to give people information about whatever you're talking about.
Right.
And I think it's about, you don't even have to make any judgments about your own credibility. We're all credible people. We're all serious about doing a great job. But if you don't put yourself in front of those sources that can vouch for your credibility, when are they going to learn about it? Right. So by linking up with them, trying to contact them and say, hey, I've got something here. Is it useful? And if they can see you and you're really trying hard to do a good job and you're putting great content out there, then it's just a matter of them recognizing that and sending the traffic and the attention your way, right?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes a competitor, I mean, you could see somebody like that as a competitor to what you're doing. Let's say they're focused on the same target audience and maybe some similarity in the content as a competitor. So, it does require you to kind of open your mind about partnerships with people that, it's it's the frenemy concept, right? Make friends with, sometimes your competitors can be good too. Not unlike the principle of what the fast food chains do, right? They build stores around where other fast food chains are, right? So there's usually a Burger King next to a Wendy's. Usually, it's the same concept to some degree. Partnerships and being around other people that are similar can be of benefit to you. Right.
Yeah, I think it's to me. I think it seems like a good theme and the sort of shortcuts that you can take if there are any. And this whole topic of trustability and getting your name out there is letting other people who have more influence vouch for you and send people your way. It's a great way to optimize your energy output, I think.
Well, in a lot of ways, that's what LinkedIn does too. LinkedIn has these endorsement systems that they have, right? That you can write a positive comment on somebody on their profile page. It's somewhat a little bit like that too.
Yeah, that's really powerful, actually. I initially didn't think it was a particularly strong thing, but actually having recommendations from people on my podcast course and on my coaching has really helped. Just numbers.
It's about
on
trust,
LinkedIn.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I actually still think LinkedIn is actually still massively growing. And I know
It
it's quite niche, like not everyone is into business. But what I see on organic numbers, I really stepped up my content in the last about 2 or 3 weeks, and I'm regularly posting like 2 or 3 content a day. And I'm just monitoring the numbers. Again, it's not necessarily just how many views, but it's how much conversations generated, who's generating that conversation, and where they're coming from. So I think LinkedIn's a good place for as a good testing ground on seeing how your content sort of fits. And for my, because my business, it fits very well.
Isn't there like a influencer status or something you get on LinkedIn? Do they give that to you, or how does that happen? Do you know?
I haven't seen anything. Well, I suppose you get to a stage where whether it's number of followers, because I think they cap you off at something like 20,000, 200,000. It's like a huge number, and you can't have any more connections. But what you can then do is go, and they can start following you. So the influencers like Tim Ferriss or Bill Gates or whatever, they get to the point where they can't have any more connections. So you end up just following their content. So I think that's what you mean. They become sort of influencers on that platform.
Yeah.
You get a yellow badge called Voice of Influence. Certain accounts are marked with that. So
I feel like that in your case too, Mark, that might be something interesting. Like when we talk about knowing the rules of the game that we're playing, it's like, how does somebody get to that? Is it just the number of followers? Is there some other number of posts? For example, something about making videos recently was, how do you get approved for making videos? Like, you got to post videos. Like, it'd be interesting to find out what the rule, what path people follow to get to that status.
I'm really, I would say ask me in another 2 or 3 months, because I'm really trialing sort of the impact of video. Video seems to impact more than text, but then if a text post really hits a sort of nerve or spot where people are interested, I've seen good spikes on community level of sort of sharing and commenting. So I'm pretty determined to use LinkedIn as my primary, even more than Facebook, because I think that's where my audience for my podcast and my businesses are going to be, rather than Facebook, which I don't think is the space for me at the moment.
Sounds like a good choice.
Yeah, and as I said at the start, the fact that you can get quite good organic growth still with LinkedIn is a good space to be at.
Yeah, cool. All right, should we wrap it up here?
Sure.
Any last words from anybody? Last comments or anything?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. I was just going to say that the conversation around building trust also kind of reflects the conversations happening around the influencer building and influencer marketing space. If you want to think more strategically about, connecting with influencers in your industry or niche, and trying to get some of those connections already in place.
Yeah, I do know toward the end of or the like midpoint last year, there were conferences that were having sessions about the concept of death of influencers not being as cool anymore. It was almost like it was a repudiation of the concept of being labeled an influencer. I think it was a little bit because I think people have the perception that it's just another way of gaming relationships, right? So and it was a pullback to authenticity around reputation, I think, is what it was really all about.
Yeah, one thing just that I'm thinking about as we're wrapping up here is I think probably Rob, you could probably speak the most on this because of your longer experience. It's like these things just take time, and I think that's important when it comes to building your reputation. Sometimes, you're the same guy you were like 3 years ago, but just because now people got to know you for 3 years, they said, oh, now I know that guy, or that gal. Okay, I trust them. And it's really just consistently showing up
Right.
being trustable for a long time.
Yeah,
then
that
sorry,
trust can be lost too. That trust can be lost. So
I was just going to say, I'd say that whatever you're doing, whether it's a career, a business, a podcast, whatever, you've got to think of a 2 to 5 year plan, because you won't get it. You won't get that trust in 6 months of just releasing. So you do need to have the authority of posting regularly, have a bank of information that people can then refer to on LinkedIn, on Google, on your podcast, on YouTube, whatever it is. And that's why I just say, like, you've just got to think long term. Nothing like, the other thing is, if something goes viral, okay, you might get 1 million downloads or 1 million views, but how many of them are going to go back to that same person then next week? Probably 10%. I would guess, maybe even less than that.
Yep.
And so even if you get something that hits viral, the likelihood of having a continuation from that, it's no guarantee. So it's a 2 to 5 year game for me.
Yeah. And you can easily lose it too. I mean, it's the old saying goes, well, what have you done for me lately? Definitely applies to this area. You have to be consistently there, right? You can't just
Todd
drop
made
away.
that point very clear as well, right? He said he's got losing listeners every week because they heard enough of his thing, his shtick,
Right.
How to get the new ones. Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, we were over a little bit time, but it was a useful few minutes. I appreciate everybody's input. I want to be respectful of everybody's moment here. Actually, if Rob and Vinay, if you can stick on for a minute, because we need to maybe make a future plan. But other than that, Mark, we'll see you around, and thanks for joining us again. Okay.
Pleasure. Thanks, guys. Speak to you later. Cheers.
Thanks.